Well, thank you for joining us today and welcome to our Changing Work Authors panel. We are here and very excited to celebrate the launch of Book Two from the Changing Work Collective, Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out, which is published on February 14th. My name's Jeff Jacobs. I'm a career HR practitioner and a contributor to book number one from the Changing Work Collective, the Amazon bestseller Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Changing Work, the Collective is an online community of individuals committed to conscious business practices and changing work from the inside out. Now, most importantly, I am joined today by two contributors to book number two, Wainwright Yu, who wrote chapter 18, Seeing Deeply, and Aaron Fromm, who wrote chapter 19, The Dates That Shape Us. Welcome to you both.
Hello,
Yeah,
Jeff.
thank you, Jack.
Now, I was fortunate to get a preview of Wayne and Aaron's chapters and found really powerful insights in both of them. So, Wayne, I'd like to start with you and jump right in. Your chapter struck me as a powerful reminder of the dangers of falling into autopilot mode and assuming that everyone we interact with is wired the way we are. And I'd like to just kick things off by inviting you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about why you were motivated to write what you did.
I'm Wayne. I There's three things I'd like to say about myself. First of all, I am the father of four, and we are a neurodivergent family, and so that is one of the things I talk about in this chapter. I am also an executive at a technology company, and also do leadership coaching with a specific focus in supporting individuals who are neurodivergent. And
Excellent.
so, and the reason why I came into that line of work was I increasingly learned about my own and my family's neurodivergence over time.
Mhm.
And I realized that I just need to be better at first supporting my own children. And then I expanded that to supporting others as well.
Excellent. Now, Wayne, let's not take anything for granted. I want to make sure that our audience, those that are listening in, are tracking with us. How would you define neurodivergence? I know that's a tall order, but when you use it, what context do you use neurodivergence in?
Yes, the sort of a plain English way of describing it, Jeff, is sort of the words that you used earlier, which is someone whose brain is wired differently. And there are different types of neurodivergence. Although one thing that people always say is that if you meet one person who's neurodivergent, you meet one person who's neurodivergent because the way that these uh, neurodivergences can show up in individuals can differ quite a bit as you go from person to person. And also the fact that people who are neurodivergent typically have multiple different traits. It's not usually just one thing, but it's usually a combination of these traits. So I'll give you a few examples, Jeff. Um, ADHD, for example, is a type of neurodivergence. So is autism, dyslexia, dysgraphia. One thing that is sort of little known is that giftedness is also a form of neurodivergence. Most people think of neurodivergence in the context of things that are considered to be deficiencies. Like the first set of things I mentioned are often seen as deficiencies. Giftedness is often seen as a strength. Neurodivergence actually comes with strengths and deficiencies at the same time. Those are a few examples.
Got it. So that's an important distinction because many of us do think about things like autism and neurodivergence as a disability, but there are strengths that are inherent with the that being wired differently, along with opportunity areas and being different from other people. And I want to dig into this a little bit further, Wayne, and then Aaron, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Sure.
Um, while your chapter extends beyond the workforce, you cite a statistic that 74% of people in the workforce have some invisible trait which makes them different. Now, of course, we're all different in different ways. So can you say a little bit more about why is that statistic meaningful and how does it relate to something like compassionate leadership?
You know, um, the word compassion comes from a root word that basically means to suffer with others or to suffer with. And I think we talked about briefly earlier how some of these traits can often come with a disabling part of it. It also comes with strengths, but it also comes with a disabling part of it. And so the way it relates for me is that if you're a compassionate leader, then you are able to understand the how the how the traits that others come to work with may make things certain things harder for them and may also make other things easier for them. And you would adjust the way a workplace is set up or how a person's specific work assignments are defined to maximize the chances that they perform well by leading on their strengths while also supporting their deficiencies.
So the very act of tuning into the unique needs of another individual, whether neurodivergent or not, could be seen as a compassionate act.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think why the statistic was so meaningful for me was that the number was so high.
Yeah.
Like 70 something percent is a very high number. 7 out of 10 people you interact with have some form of meaningful difference. And and the other part of it is it's invisible. I think we have, I personally find it difficult sometimes to act compassionately with people who are visibly different from me.
Sure.
Imagine acting compassionately for someone who you actually don't see that difference. Like it's much more likely you make assumptions that they think the same, act the same, have the same profile as you, if they present exactly how other people present.
Well, in our brain, partially it's for efficiency's sake, is that we don't have necessarily, or we don't perceive that we have the time to really dig into getting to know another individual. So for efficiency, I'm going to label you, I'm going to put you in a box and whatnot. Now, as a lifelong HR practitioner, you had me very quickly with your story about offering feedback to an employee who was struggling, and you share that you characterize it as being too late to help the employee turn around their performance. And I know there's a lot of things that can contribute to that phrase too late. And I wanted to explore that a little bit. I mean, was it related to the performance that they just couldn't turn things around? Was it too late to change their brand and how they were perceived by others? Was it a commentary about maybe it was too late to create the trust and safety for them to share what they were experiencing so you could help them? So, can you elaborate a little bit on that scenario?
Yeah, I loved how you broke it down, Jeff. I think it's actually all of those things. So when I say too late, I do mean from a skills perspective, this employee had been assigned a role that did not leverage her strengths, and so she was, on an objective basis, failing to meet the expectations of the role.
Hmm.
She did have other strengths, but those were not the strengths that this specific role needed. So in order for us to give her another chance, she would have had to transition to a different role. So objectively, within the role she was given, she was not performing well. Secondly, I think the other two factors also play a role. There is this concept of self-fulfilling prophecies, meaning if someone is perceived to be underperforming, then sort of the environment uh, sort of supports that underperformance or makes the underperformance more likely to actually happen. And there's two ways that shows up. One is it's a self-imposed self-fulfilling prophecy, meaning the employee, when they've been labeled or have been given negative feedback, that they themselves lose confidence, lose
Hmm.
motivation, and start to, which further fuels underperformance. There's also the social aspect of it, which you mentioned, which is once other people around them have seen the underperformance, they tend to work around that person instead of working with that person, um,
Yes.
cut off communication from them because it's just hard to get things done through them. So they get things done through other means instead. And so all of those things play a role. Um, and then finally, I think this specific individual sort of lost confidence in herself. And
Hmm.
that's perhaps the most difficult part. Um, and sometimes in a sort of an HR context, sometimes a reset is needed for that
Yeah.
person to, turn from turn from that negative self-perception to a more positive self-belief.
And I've heard repeatedly that sometimes someone just is in the wrong seat on the bus, but unfortunately, many corporate cultures find it easier to move someone off the bus than to find the right seat on the bus, because
Yes.
it does take extra work in the process. One more question for you, Wayne. as introduction before we turn things over to Aaron, and that is that you told a story that was even closer to home about your son and his high school performance. Can you share a little bit about that story and also the interesting guidance that was provided to you by your son's teacher?
Yeah, the funny thing, Jeff, is he was actually in elementary school, not in high school.
Oh, elementary school, excuse me.
But so the vignette in the book is basically me throwing out his homework out the front door into the lawn because I had hit a certain level of frustration with his unwillingness to basically do the work. And I share that at the beginning of that school year, the teacher had told us that this was the year that the kid should be independent. And she was saying, like, the parents should really take a step back, give the kids a chance to do the work independently. And this is just the way it works. And that's what we should do. Um, and I sort of took that advice at face value,
Mhm,
and it wasn't working for us.
mhm.
And so that comes with a lot of self-doubt and guilt, like, oh, is there something wrong with my child? Like, why is it that everybody else can seem to do this? And he specifically was struggling with it. It came with a lot of self-doubt, and therefore the self-doubt leads to frustration. Frustration leads to papers flying out the front door. Um, and so that was the context, and how it relates to kind of the broader story in the chapter is that the teacher's message assumes that everybody's the same, that everybody is maturing in their executive function at the same rate. And if you are to look at, actually true for both gifted individuals and ADHD, people with ADHD, they're about 2 to 3 years behind in executive function development from the general population.
Interesting.
And so if you think that, and 2 to 3 years when you're 30 is, not that much, but 2 to 3 years when you're 8 is a lot.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Wayne. I'm going to come back to you in just a few minutes. And Aaron, I want to turn things to you. Your chapter was also very deeply personal and related to family. Would you mind introducing yourself and share a little bit about how you were motivated to write the chapter you did?
Sure. Wayne, thank you so much for that. That was really an interesting conversation. But yeah, so my name's Aaron Fromm. Currently I'm helping organizations, small and medium-sized organizations with their strategy around artificial intelligence. But, for me, this chapter was around, kind of seeing, being there and being, and watching and being present to see, kind of tell the story about how my father helped me. And just recently, my wife and I were able to adopt a child. And if you read the chapter, it was kind of around that my son who we adopted and my father who passed away almost 18 years ago share a birthday. So it's something that's really special inside of our family. And it got me to thinking about, okay, how did I get to where I am today? What made me who I am? And that was, traits that I got from watching my father and his work ethic growing up. So there's good, there's bad, but there's a lot of things that after he passed away, that I learned that he had touched a lot of different people and helped them through tough times in both their careers or their personal life, or helped them talk them through making tough decisions. Thinking about how I've gotten to this point in my life, I was like, those are things that I'd like to pass on to my son as he's starting to grow up. And Wayne, I'm looking forward to these next couple of years because he's 2, and I think there may be kind of a neurodivergence kind of starting to show up there as well. So I was really interested in reading your chapter as well, but kind of taking those things and kind of understanding this is what makes me who I am. It was made my father who he was, but it's also the traits that I can also start to show to my son. And these are all kind of, I look at it as these are things that are being kind of conscious leaders, is in our personal lives, we're also leaders. To
Hmm.
kind of start to kind of show that to our families, show that to our friends, show that to the people that are around. And you really never know where those, relationships are going to go. Perfect example is, I got a friend who actually pinged me this morning. And she was kind of telling me how I was helping her through a tough time that she was going through probably about 3 or 4 years ago. So these are things that kind of go around and come around. And it was this kind of a story of how that, was kind of happened throughout my life.
Now, Aaron, you used a phrase, conscious leaders. Can you elaborate a
Yeah.
little bit on what it means to be a conscious leader?
I think it's from for me, and I can only say from my side, from being a conscious, kind of a conscious leader is being there is, understanding that things that you do, things that you show up with every day, people are looking at that. And they're not looking at it necessarily like, hey, I'm looking at you, Jeff. They're looking at it as how are you presenting yourself? How are you solving problems? How do you get past the really hard things?
Hmm.
Uh, that sort of thing. So I think being a leader is not necessarily being a manager. It's
Hmm.
not necessarily a people leader. And like Jeff, you're in the people profession, and being a people leader is part of the manager's duty. But also, I think being a true leader is people instinctively trust what you're doing, and they want to be
Hmm.
around you, and they want to follow what you're doing. And again, kind of circling back to this chapter is those are things that I learned about my father. I just intrinsically knew it because he was my father, but I've heard that from other people that I spoke to after he passed. Like I said, it's been 18 years. So, I'm getting these stories here and there. A good friend of mine who is now a CEO of a small company in the Denver metro area shared a story of how he actually gave him the confidence to go on that track in his life. And I
Hmm.
was just like, I never knew he did that. But those are kind of the things, and I'm like, those are being, like I say, being a conscious leader is he just gave that ability, that support, that nurturing that he needed at that point.
He was a role model in many
Yeah.
regards. And one of the very poignant aspects of the chapter that you wrote, it really struck me that you learned even more what a compassionate man your father was when you saw him through the eyes of the people who attended his memorial service.
Hmm.
Um, how have those kind of lessons, the things that you heard secondhand through other people's experiences, how have they impacted your life? And especially now that you're a father, um, how
Yeah.
does that influence how you show up as in that role?
They're little stories. I mean, and most of them you kind of forget, or you kind of merge with other stories that you've heard about. But I kind of put them in as these are the things that if I can be half of what that was, I'm going to impact a lot of people. And for
Mhm.
me, that's an important thing. And I'm not like impacting like, hey, this is something that people need to do. This is impacting of I'm giving of myself in my experience so that they can you can be there for each other as you're going through hard times. Because when it's easy. But when it's hard, that's when you can really try to figure out, okay, you can lean on those stories, you can lean on those past experiences to get you through to the other side.
And speaking of those hard situations, your father had a powerful test to
Yes.
help you maintain perspective when things were difficult. Would you share
Yeah.
that test with us?
Sure. I mean, I think it's important for everyone to realize my father was an attorney. So, so what I'm about to say comes from kind of more of the law side. Um, but he was an attorney, and he had a thing was when you came to him with a problem that seemed like the end of the world, he always had kind of a quick litmus test, and that was, is someone in jail or did someone die? And if
Mhm.
you said no to both of those, he was like, well, we can figure this problem out. It's not that bad. So, I mean, it could be, it puts a lot into context when you realize I'm still here. I'm still with my family. I still am going home. Yeah, I may have had
Yes.
a really bad day. I may have lost my job. I may have, gotten to, an automobile. I may have accident. I may have gotten a ticket, something of those nature. But it's all going to be okay. I'm going to be able to figure this out. I think that was kind of his litmus test to kind of get you back into center to say it's not that bad. Let's kind of get this going a little bit more.
This reminds me of something that you wrote about, Wayne, in your chapter, this notion of one ideal of perfection. The implication that there can be one right answer, one right approach to any given situation, and that people are willing to judge us, and that we can feel very, you know, self-aware or concerned. Um, And this that implication really seems at odds, Aaron, with what your father's belief would have been about challenging obstacles requiring new and creative solutions and things of that nature. What is your both this is to both of you,
Mhm.
this notion of one right way, one perfect answer, and what's your take on that now with these new perspectives you have?
I'll go first. I mean, if I think for my father, when you say, hey, he was kind of, take a better look at it. It's not that bad. He was an attorney. He always had a black and white, but he didn't know
Hmm.
there was areas of gray, right?
Yeah.
That there could be something in the middle, but he always had an idea of, and he was a manager. He actually had he was actually had divisions under him by the time he retired. He always said he always would look for his leaders and the people that were under him to bring the ideas to the table, and
Mhm.
he would always look for those individuals to bring those ideas to the table. And it didn't matter what the idea was. Let's bring it to the table. Let's talk through it, figure it out. But as a leader, once the decision was made, that was the decision he expected everyone to go follow.
Mm.
Right. That was where it was going. He would always kind of say there's that time to say, let's figure out everyone's ideas on the table. Let's talk through it. But we have to agree that once we actually go do it, this is what we're going to go do, type thing. So I think for him, and this is kind of how and I've had a chance to be a people manager in my career as well, is to sit down and kind of get all the different minds, to
Yeah.
come and bring those ideas. And I can't necessarily say I've had anybody who is confessed that they were neurodivergent, but I'm sure I've had them on my teams, but they've brought great ideas. And I think if we're just clear that once we've made the decision, if it's a hard decision, if it's an easy decision, that's the decision we're going with as a team, and we go forward. And that's
Yeah.
what we're going to do.
And Wayne, I'd love your perspective on this, especially the implications for collaboration. Because if we assume there's only one way of doing things, we don't benefit from the diversity of ideas that Aaron just described. And collaboration is going to be a lot harder if we think there's only one way. What's been your experience on this topic?
This is when people hear the words, they often think it's easier to do than it actually is. And the reason why people think it's easier to do is because they think that the options are equally good ideas.
Hmm.
Let's just say you have two options for the path forward, and there's some ambiguity on which is the right path. And so, of course, everybody would say, "Yeah, I understand that different people may have differing opinions on this, and so therefore they might have different choices." But let me give you a different example, which is kids brushing their teeth. We would probably all agree that kids should brush their teeth because otherwise they'll have cavities. Sometimes letting people live life the way they want to live it means that you're going to allow your kids not to brush their teeth. That's a lot harder to do because we all
Hmm.
like, if you're a grown up and you've kind of went through life, you're going to believe like, nope, brushing your teeth is super important. I don't understand why you find this hard to grasp because cavities are painful, expensive, etc. Has detrimental impact to your health. In the work context, sometimes it actually is allowing people to do things that you think might be a mistake.
Mhm.
And that is a lot harder because you as an individual, as a leader, have strong conviction that it is a mistake. And sometimes you just have to let them do things the way they do it. And that's sort of the hard part. Um, I have intentionally, at least currently in my team, I have certain members of my team who are sort of almost the opposite of me, kind of leadership style wise.
Yeah.
And I find that that leads to some moments where I'm like, I have to pause myself because the way I would handle a situation is very different from the way they'd handle it. And it takes me, a few seconds to readjust and recenter and say, yep, this is your decision and you have to take it forward the way you think it makes sense.
So much of what we're talking about is predicated on fostering safe and caring cultures. Um,
Mhm.
and this idea that it's sometimes I hear people talk about celebrating failure, and I'm quick to remind them it's not celebrating failure, it's celebrating the lessons that come from failure. And in your chapter, Aaron, you talk about the importance of cultivating spaces where everyone and everything can find their place and thrive. And
Hmm.
that's predicated on creating safe and trusting cultures. And I don't believe it's just managers that are responsible for that. Any team we're part of, if we're working with people, we play a role there. So
Yep.
I'm curious, Aaron, let's start with you. What's been your experience in what factors contribute to an environment where I feel like I can bring my whole self to work and feel safe?
I've been part of good environments and been part of bad environments. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
And what it comes down is it comes down from the top down. If leadership, if the senior leadership is not someone who says you can go make mistakes or calls people out on the carpet in public and says, "Hey, you made a mistake," this that's not a good thing. Here's what you should have done. That's going to quell people from feeling safe from making mistakes. So when I've seen really good leadership, really good teams, and it starts from the top down, and you have as either your frontline manager or second line manager or just someone that is a leader that someone follows. If you see someone make a mistake, yeah, I think it's your responsibility to go help them solve that mistake or let them make it enough so that they learn from it. But don't berate them in public. Don't bring them out on the carpet in front of everybody. Do it on the side in private and say, hey, look, this is how I would have handled it. Let's figure out why you did what you did. Maybe we learned something from it. It's not so bad that we can't recover from it. That sort of thing. So it's just a culture of trust that says, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. And that also treats people that, hey, if you made a mistake, and I always had this as when I was leading people is if you make a mistake, good, bad, or indifferent, I need to know. And I'm not
Mhm.
going to berate you for making that mistake. I want you to tell me what it was, and then we can go figure out how to fix it or do something that's going to solve the problem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Wayne, what would you add to Aaron's comment?
Just one quick thought, Jeff. This may be controversial.
Oh, bring it on.
Is that trust is what trust is what delivers safety. And so what I mean by that is when you trust your leaders, when you trust your peers, when you trust the people around you, you feel a greater sense of safety
Mhm.
being with those people, working for those people, working with those people.
Mhm.
And I say that because there's a bunch that goes into safety that is not controlled. The way the economy is going, the way consumers will respond to your products, the interest rates. There's so much going on in the world that's really not in our control, and many of these factors can make us feel, at risk.
Mhm.
But if you trust the people you work with, then that's what makes you feel more safe. You feel like
Mhm.
you're being judged based on objective and fair criteria. You feel like your work is being evaluated correctly. It's many of those things. In fact, there's been, you can look at some of the jobs out there in the world where objectively the person is in an unsafe environment,
Mhm.
but because of high degrees of trust, they may still feel very safe, safe in the way we're using it in this context.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and I think it really goes to how we feel valued as well, because I think there's a correlation between, if not a causation, between trust and feeling valued. Now, speaking of trust, as we start to wrap up here, I can't help but reflect on, both of you wrote these very personal, heartfelt chapters, but they weren't just stories for story's sake. They were instructional. They had a
Mhm.
lesson to them, a powerful leadership lesson. And yours were two of now 50 different chapters that have come out across two books from 50 different authors who have shared from themselves. And this is all based on your affiliation with the Changing Work Collective. I wonder if you both could comment. Aaron, I'll ask you to go first. What
Mhm.
what ha connected you to Changing Work and inspired you to share of yourself in this way?
It was, I'll be honest. I mean, about a year or so ago, I went through a layoff and kind of was trying to figure out what I was going to do next and ran across one of the founders of Changing Work, who lives not that far from me. We
Yeah.
got to talking about what he was doing, and it kind of just rang true for what I was doing. and got to know what was going on. And I was like, this is for me, community is something that's really important.
Mhm.
And I was like, if I'm going to go out on my own and do my own business, having community for me is really important. That's something I thrived on in a corporate world. It suddenly was gone. So I
Yeah.
needed to kind of find that and find that community so I could listen to other people's problems and have the water cooler talk, that sort of thing. That's something that's just kind of okay. That gets my day, gets my mind going in different directions, type stuff. So it just seemed like it was at the right time, at the good step, just to kind of say, hey, here's a good community of other practitioners where we can give to each other, we can talk about stuff, we complain about stuff that you would have, but also be able to share what I'm doing, where I'm trying to make a difference, but also like the chapter I wrote, just give something back. I just like, some place where I can give something back, but it's a place where I know people are going to hear it. I mean, I could write it on the internet somewhere, but who's going to see it?
Yeah.
This is kind of a place where it all comes together, where everyone's going to be able to see it and get something out of it.
I really appreciated something that I heard the editor of both of our books say, and I'll paraphrase here, but she said something to the nature of, we write so that our readers don't feel alone in the world.
Mhm.
I thought that was a really beautiful sentiment because we feel as though, our stories are unique to us, and they are, but people can relate to different aspects. And I related to both of your stories. How about you, Wayne? What has been your connection to changing work and why you felt that you could be vulnerable enough to share what you did?
Yeah. So I think changing work is both audacious and humble at the same time.
Hmm.
It's audacious in the context of asserting that we can change the way work happens. Work is something that, lots and lots of people do and spend a lot of their days doing. And to say that we can change that, I think is a really big aspiration. And yet the from the inside out part of sort of the changing work um, kind of aspiration makes it sound much more achievable,
Hmm.
meaning you're going to do it from the inside out, one step at a time, one person at a time.
Yeah.
And so it's that combination that I thought was really inspiring, because anybody who hears the words changing work would say, yes, we spend so much of our life energy working. We would like to make sure that that life energy is better spent. And there's a long list of things we could do to make work more meaningful for everyone.
Yeah.
And yet I found the humility of the latter half inspiring in that we don't really know how we're going to get there yet, but we're going to get there one step at a time, 1% at a time, inside out. I thought that was really inspiring. So that's the primary reason why.
And the
I think
Please, Aaron, go ahead.
I was gonna say the one thing I was gonna kind of Wayne kind of bounce off that a little bit more is like I said earlier is a lot of cultures seem to be top down, but I think changing work is saying let's go in from the bottom and start to change it from the bottom up. So it's like I said, it's kind of really changing how the problem solved and how people attack the problem. And I think that's a good thing. That's talking about the people who are actually doing the work, the people who are actually putting their hands, Wayne, you and I are both in software, putting hands on keyboard, or making something or doing that. Those are the actual workers. That's going to change it. And that's if they're doing something good and making the company move forward, I think that's something that people have to listen to.
And I would add to consideration that changing work from the inside out means changing us as individuals from the inside out and
Mhm.
creating greater self-awareness, which I think is also one of the beauties of this community. So, for those of you who are listening in and are curious about changing work, you can check us out at changingwork.org. And I want to thank you, Aaron, and you, Wayne, for your commitment to this process, to the time and effort you put into sharing your hard-earned wisdom and experience, and both in your chapters and here today. Aaron, where can our listeners find you if they'd like to follow up with any connection requests?
The easiest way to find me is just on LinkedIn. I'm out
LinkedIn,
there,
okay.
so there's a couple of other Aaron Froms out there, but um, you'll find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy.
Okay, great. And how about you, Wayne?
Same thing, LinkedIn would be great, as well as Wainwright you at wainwrightyou.com.
Excellent. And once again, Changing Work's first book, Leading with Self-Awareness, is available on Amazon. And our second book, Leading with Compassion, which includes these powerful chapters, available on February 14th, is available under the Media tab at changingwork.org and also on Amazon. Thank you for joining us today. And if you found this content valuable, please take a moment, drop this link into an email to share it with colleagues of yours, or even a social media post and share it with your community. Have a great day. And once again, Aaron and Wayne, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff.